The room was eerily silent, the only sound being the soft click of the clock ticking on the wall. But then, a faint whimper broke the stillness, followed by a sharp, desperate bark. A service dog, eyes wide with panic, stood beside his owner who was now on the floor, trembling uncontrollably. The dog's heart raced, knowing the danger his owner was in. He could feel it in the air. His owner was about to fall into a seizure, and there was no time to waste. Without hesitation, the dog leaped into action, pawing at his owner's hand, licking his face, and crying out in the most heart-wrenching way. But there was no response. His owner was unresponsive, lying motionless on the cold, hard floor. The dog's instinct kicked in as he scanned the room for help, but there was no one. He was alone with his human, and the world outside seemed unaware of the urgency unfolding within the four walls. The dog barked again, louder this time, hoping the sound would bring someone to their aid, but nothing changed. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. The dog, ever loyal and always alert, paced back and forth, his eyes glued to his owner, hoping for any sign of movement. Nothing came. He knew he couldn't do this alone, yet he didn't dare leave his owner. He needed help. He needed someone to see the silent plea in his eyes. The seconds felt like hours, and the dog's resolve was beginning to waver. He knew he couldn't wait forever. Then, just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, he heard a sound, a soft moan, followed by the faintest twitch of his owner's hand. The dog froze, his body tense, heart racing with anticipation. His owner's eyes fluttered open. Slowly, as if struggling to break free from the fog of the seizure, his eyes focused on the dog's face. The dog wagged his tail weakly, relieved, though his body still trembled from the tension of the ordeal. His owner, barely able to speak, whispered, "Good boy. You saved me." Tears welled up in the dog's eyes. Though he couldn't understand the words, the emotion was clear. His owner was alive. The bond between them had never been stronger. In that moment, the dog knew, without a doubt, that loyalty wasn't just a word. It was an instinct, a force that kept them both alive. A bond that transcended everything else. He had been his owner's protector, his lifeline, and together they would face whatever came next. The dog lay down beside his owner, his head resting on the man's chest as he breathed a sigh of relief. There was no place he'd rather be than right here, beside the one he loved, ready to protect him again if needed. This was the kind of bond that no illness, no seizure, and no moment of fear could ever break. As the minutes passed, the dog never left his side. His eyes never strayed from his owner, now barely conscious, breathing shallowly on the cold floor. The dog's tail wagged weakly, each soft thump against the floor a silent testament to his determination. His owner's hand, still resting against the ground, twitched again. The dog let out a soft whimper and gently nudged it, as if urging his human to wake. The quiet hum of the air conditioner in the background was the only sound filling the room, until suddenly, the softest of groans escaped his owner's lips. The dog's ears perked up. Slowly, his owner's eyelids fluttered open. There was no immediate recognition, only confusion in his eyes, but the dog could see the faintest flicker of understanding. The dog, still lying close, waited, not daring to move a muscle, just in case his owner needed him again. His owner's eyes, now clearer, looked down at the dog. The man's voice was weak but filled with gratitude as he whispered, "Thank you, boy." The dog's tail began to wag a little faster, a silent celebration of the small victory. The room, once filled with tension, now felt like a safe haven, a place of peace where nothing else mattered but the bond they shared. The dog, still vigilant, gently rested his head on his owner's lap, his body relaxing for the first time in what felt like hours. He had done what he was trained to do. He had saved his owner. And now, it was time to rest, to be there, to offer the comfort only a loyal companion could. His owner, though exhausted, reached down and stroked the dog's fur. The gentle touch was enough to soothe the dog's frazzled nerves, reaffirming the deep connection they shared. The dog closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to relax, knowing that whatever came next, he would face it by his owner's side. As his owner drifted into a deeper sleep, the dog remained close, guarding him with the same loyalty he had always shown. It wasn't just a job for him. It was a promise, one he had made long before that day. He had kept his word. He had been there when it mattered most. The quiet comfort of the room, the steady breathing of his owner, and the warmth of their bond were all that mattered now. The dog stayed alert, as always, but in that moment, he allowed himself to feel the peace he had fought so hard for. His job was far from over, but in that stillness, he knew he had done enough. The morning light streamed through the window, casting a warm glow across the room. His owner was still asleep, the quiet rise and fall of his chest a welcome sound after the chaos of the night before. The dog, ever vigilant, lay beside him, his eyes alert, watching over his human like a silent guardian. The room was calm now, peaceful even, a stark contrast to the tension of the previous hours. The dog's tail twitched every now and then, a soft reminder of the bond that had carried them through. He knew that he couldn't let his guard down completely. Even in the calm, he stayed prepared, ready to respond if his owner needed him again. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the peaceful silence was broken by the sound of his owner's groggy voice. "Hey, boy." The dog's ears perked up, and he lifted his head, his eyes locking with his owner's. The man reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he ran his fingers through the dog's fur. A small smile crept across his face. "You saved me, didn't you?" The dog's tail wagged slowly, the simple acknowledgement enough to make his heart swell with pride. He had done his job, just as he had been trained to do. But it was more than that. It was the unspoken promise between them, the bond that kept them connected, even in the darkest moments. His owner, though still recovering, slowly sat up, his body stiff but determined. The dog stood, ready to assist, to offer support as his owner made his way to the edge of the bed. There was a moment of hesitation, a brief pause before the man stood fully, holding onto the bedpost for balance. The dog was immediately by his side, his body pressed close, offering steadying support. They moved slowly together, step by step, as the dog guided his owner toward the door. The man's movements were shaky at first, but with each step, he grew stronger. The dog, always at his side, watched for any sign of distress, ready to act at a moment's notice. They made their way into the living room, the dog's tail wagging with quiet satisfaction. His owner had made it through the worst of it, and now, they would face the rest of the day together, just like always. As they settled down on the couch, the man spoke again, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you." The dog leaned into him, his head resting against his owner's lap. No words were needed. The bond between them was enough. And in that moment, everything felt right again. As the days passed, the bond between the dog and his owner only deepened. The man, though still recovering, was regaining his strength, and each day seemed like a small victory. The dog, as loyal as ever, stayed by his side through it all, his presence a constant reminder of the miracle they had shared. Mornings were quieter now, a peaceful routine settling in as the man went through his exercises, stretching and moving his limbs with care. The dog would sit close, watching every movement, waiting for any sign that his owner might need him again. It wasn't just about the big moments anymore. It was the little things that mattered. The way his owner would smile when their eyes met, the soft hand that reached down to pet him at the end of each day. The dog's tail wagged slowly with contentment, feeling that same deep sense of purpose. One afternoon, after a particularly tiring therapy session, the man sat down on the couch, sweat on his brow but a sense of accomplishment in his eyes. The dog immediately jumped up beside him, curling up at his feet, resting his head on his owner's lap. The man absent-mindedly scratched behind his ears, his fingers brushing the familiar, comforting fur. "You've been so good to me," the man said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how I would have made it without you." The dog responded with a soft bark, as if to say, "I'm here for you, always." There was no need for further words. The silence between them spoke volumes. It was a silence built on trust, on the understanding that no matter what happened, they would always have each other. The man leaned back, resting his head against the couch, letting out a long breath. The dog lay still, content, feeling the warmth of the moment. The world outside felt distant, as though they were in their own little bubble, untouched by the struggles that once seemed so overwhelming. This was their new normal now, one where strength came not from fighting alone, but from standing together. The dog, still lying peacefully by his side, knew that no matter what the future held, he would be there. He had been through the worst, and now, with his owner's strength slowly returning, they would face whatever came next together. And as the afternoon sunlight filtered through the window, casting a soft glow over the room, the dog closed his eyes, his body relaxed but his heart ever vigilant, knowing that in this moment, they were safe, and that was all that mattered. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, the bond between the man and his dog grew stronger. His recovery was slow but steady, and the dog, ever by his side, was always there to offer comfort and support. Their routine had become something familiar, something safe. Mornings began with stretches and slow movements, followed by moments of rest on the couch where the dog would curl up next to him. They shared silent companionship, the kind that spoke more than words ever could. One morning, as the sun rose and filtered through the window, casting a soft glow over the room, the man sat up, his body still aching but with a renewed sense of purpose. The dog, sensing the change, lifted his head from his paws and padded over to the man's side. The man reached down and petted the dog's head, his fingers brushing through the thick fur. "You ready for another day, boy?" he asked softly. The dog's tail thumped once on the floor, a simple answer, but one that carried a lifetime of meaning. The man smiled as he carefully stood, the dog immediately by his side. It was a slow process, but he was no longer as shaky as before. With each step, he gained a little more confidence. His hand rested lightly on the dog's back as they moved toward the door. The dog walked beside him, steady and unwavering, his presence a constant reassurance. Outside, the air was crisp, the smell of fresh grass filling the air. The man took a deep breath, feeling the coolness of the morning. It was a feeling he had missed, a feeling that reminded him that life could still hold moments of peace. The dog, ever alert, walked ahead, his eyes scanning the surroundings as they made their way down the path. The man walked slowly, enjoying the stillness of the morning, the sounds of the birds in the trees, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. The dog glanced back at him, checking in, making sure he was okay. The man nodded, his heart full of gratitude for the dog who had saved him, for the bond they shared, and for the strength that had brought him this far. They continued down the path together, side by side, the man and his dog, moving forward one step at a time. Each day was a reminder that with loyalty, love, and determination, even the darkest moments could be overcome. The world around them was changing, but the one constant, the one unshakable thing, was the bond between the man and his dog. The weeks continued to pass, and with each new day, the bond between the man and his dog only deepened. The man's recovery was steady, and though it wasn't easy, he was finding strength in the small victories. The dog, his ever-loyal companion, stayed by his side every step of the way, a constant source of comfort and support. Their routine had settled into something comfortable, something the man could rely on. Every morning, he would stretch and move slowly, the dog watching him closely, always there, ready to offer a reassuring nudge if needed. As the man continued his rehabilitation, the dog never left his side, always present to provide the steady encouragement that only a dog's presence could offer. One afternoon, the man stood in front of the mirror, his reflection showing the toll of the past few months. His muscles were still weak, his body still adjusting, but there was a glimmer of strength in his eyes. He had come a long way, but he knew the journey was not yet over. As he took a step back, the dog was there, standing by his side, as if he knew the man needed him more than ever. The man smiled and bent down, his hand finding the familiar fur of the dog's head. "You've been with me every step of the way, haven't you?" he said softly. The dog's tail wagged, and his eyes shone with quiet understanding. The man continued, "I don't think I could have done it without you." The dog gave a small bark, as if acknowledging the words, and the man chuckled softly. They had come so far together, and though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear: they would face whatever came next as a team. That evening, as they sat on the couch together, the man gently scratched behind the dog's ears, his hand moving slowly but with purpose. He reflected on everything they had been through. The dog had been there through the darkest moments, standing by him when he needed it most, and now, as the man's strength began to return, he could feel the weight of gratitude in his heart. The dog was more than just a service animal. He was a friend, a protector, and a constant reminder that no matter what, they would always have each other. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged in the fire of struggle and triumph. And as the night settled in, the man leaned back into the couch, his dog resting beside him, feeling a sense of peace that had been hard to find for so long. The world around them had changed, but in this moment, they were right where they needed to be, together. As the weeks went by, the man's progress continued, albeit at a slow pace. But with every small victory, he felt a bit more like his old self. His muscles were growing stronger, the pain slowly fading into the background, and the physical therapy sessions, though exhausting, were becoming something he could handle with determination. Throughout it all, the dog remained his constant companion. The dog had never left his side, watching over him with those warm, knowing eyes, always alert, always there. Each day, as the man worked through his recovery, the dog would lie quietly beside him, offering his quiet support, a reminder that he was never truly alone. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, the man found himself sitting in the living room, catching his breath. The dog, sensing his exhaustion, padded over to him, nudging him with his nose. The man reached down, scratching behind the dog's ears, his fingers brushing through the thick fur. "You're always here, aren't you?" he asked, his voice soft, a smile tugging at his lips. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, a silent affirmation of his unwavering presence. The man had come to realize that the dog's loyalty wasn't just a trait, it was a bond that had been forged through the toughest moments of his life, and now, with his strength returning, it felt more unbreakable than ever. As the night wore on, the man leaned back on the couch, his dog curling up beside him. The soft glow of the lamp cast a warm light over the room, filling it with a sense of calm. There was no rush now. They didn't need to go anywhere or do anything. They were together, and that was all that mattered. The man's hand gently rested on the dog's back, and he let out a quiet sigh, feeling the peace settle in. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with the dog by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. The bond they shared had carried them through the hardest moments, and it would continue to do so. For the first time in a long while, the man felt truly at peace, knowing that no matter the challenges that lay ahead, he and his dog would always face them together. The days seemed to blend together now, each one a step forward in the man's recovery, each one a new chapter in their shared journey. The dog remained as steady as ever, his presence a constant source of calm. The man had begun to do more for himself, taking longer walks, going outside more often, but always with the dog by his side, a silent protector in a world that was still adjusting to the changes they both faced. One morning, the man decided to venture further than he had before. He had made great strides, and though the road ahead was still long, he felt the urge to push himself. The dog, of course, was more than ready to accompany him. The man opened the door, and the cool morning air greeted them both. The dog immediately stepped outside, tail wagging, his eyes scanning the surroundings as if to take in every detail. The man smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. For the first time in a while, it felt like a new beginning. They walked together, side by side, the dog always keeping a few steps ahead, making sure the man was safe, ready to act if needed. The man's steps were steady, though slower than he'd like, but each one brought him closer to where he wanted to be. The dog occasionally glanced back, his amber eyes locking with the man's, as if to reassure him. They came to a small park not far from home, a place the man had frequented before his accident, but now it felt unfamiliar. The benches were empty, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and the quiet hum of the world around them felt peaceful. The man sat on a bench, resting for a moment, his dog immediately lying at his feet, always alert but content. As the man sat there, watching the birds fly overhead, he realized just how much had changed in such a short time. His body still ached, but it wasn't the same pain. It was the kind of ache that came with growth, with healing. He was no longer the man who had fallen. He was becoming someone new. And through it all, the dog was there, ever loyal, ever patient, a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, there was always hope. The man petted the dog's head, a quiet thanks that needed no words. The dog's tail thumped once, the sound of contentment, of a bond that was unbreakable, forged in struggle, but now tempered with peace. The man took a deep breath, the weight of everything he had been through still lingering, but it didn't feel so heavy now. Together, they had come this far, and together, they would continue to move forward. The world was waiting, but for now, this moment of calm was enough. The sun began to set, casting a warm golden light across the quiet park. The man and his dog sat together, the dog's head resting on his owner's lap. They had spent the afternoon walking, exploring the world around them at a pace the man could handle, taking in the fresh air and the sounds of nature. The man was feeling a sense of accomplishment, a feeling that had been so foreign to him not long ago. He had come so far, and the journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope for the future. He looked down at his dog, who was now peacefully resting beside him. The dog had been there through every trial, every moment of doubt, and every step of recovery. Without hesitation, the dog had given everything he had to ensure the man's safety, his loyalty unwavering, his love constant. The bond between them was unspoken but understood in every gesture, every look. The dog had become more than just a companion. He was a lifeline. And as the man sat in the park, surrounded by the quiet hum of the world around him, he realized just how much he owed to the dog who had saved him. He reached down and scratched behind the dog's ears, his fingers lightly tracing the familiar fur. "You've been through so much with me," the man said softly. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." The dog's tail thumped once on the ground, a simple response, but the meaning was clear. The man smiled, a tear threatening to escape his eye. It was a tear of gratitude, of love, of understanding. The world had been a dark place for so long, but now there was light. The journey ahead would not be easy, but with his dog by his side, the man knew he was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had overcome the hardest of times, and together, they would continue to move forward, side by side. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, the man leaned back, his dog still by his side, content and secure. The peaceful silence between them was enough to fill the space, to let them both rest in the knowledge that they were no longer just surviving. They were living together. The man woke up the next morning to the soft sound of birds chirping outside the window. The world outside was bathed in soft light, the sky a pale blue, the air crisp and fresh. He stretched slowly, the aches and pains still present, but not as overwhelming as they had been. He glanced down at the dog, who was curled up beside him, still asleep, his breathing soft and steady. The dog had been there every step of the way, offering silent support and companionship, and the man knew that he could always count on him. As the man got out of bed, the dog immediately rose to his feet, following him closely, as if waiting for the next step in their journey together. The man smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. He knew that, despite everything, he was no longer alone. The dog had been by his side through the hardest moments, and now, as he continued to heal, the dog's loyalty remained a constant, unwavering presence. The man moved toward the kitchen, his movements slow but steady. He could feel the strength returning to his limbs with each step. The dog followed him, tail wagging gently, his eyes full of the same love and devotion that had been there since the beginning. The man took a deep breath, savoring the simple moment. The world outside still held challenges, but for now, he had everything he needed right here. He poured himself a cup of coffee, and the dog sat beside him, looking up expectantly. The man chuckled softly, setting the cup down and reaching down to pet the dog's head. "You really do stick by me, don't you?" he said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. The dog's tail thumped once, as if in acknowledgement. They shared a quiet moment, the bond between them speaking louder than words ever could. Outside, the day was unfolding, the world continuing to turn. But inside, in this quiet kitchen, the man and his dog were exactly where they needed to be, together. The challenges of the past were slowly fading, replaced by a quiet hope for the future. And no matter what came next, the man knew he would face it with the dog by his side. Together, they had come so far, and together, they would continue to move forward, side by side, one step at a time. The morning air was crisp as the man stepped outside, the dog by his side, walking at a steady pace. Their footsteps were synchronized, a rhythm that had formed. Over the past few months, the man was stronger now, though still mindful of his limitations. Each day, He tested himself a little more, knowing that progress would come in small increments. The dog, however, had already proved his worth many times over, standing as a silent guardian beside him, unwavering in his loyalty. As they walked down the quiet street, the man took in the world around him. The trees were beginning to show signs of the changing season, the leaves just starting to turn gold and red. The sun, still low in the sky, bathed everything in a soft glow, casting long shadows across the ground. It felt like the world was finally moving forward too, not just him. He glanced down at his dog, the same dog that had been by his side during the darkest moments of his recovery. "You've been there for me through it all, haven't you?" the man said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. The dog looked up at him, his amber eyes warm and steady, as if to say, "I'm always here." It was a simple moment, but to the man, it was everything. They had both come so far. The dog had been there during the toughest times, offering support without question, without hesitation. The man knew that no matter what the future held, he would never have to face it alone. As they continued their walk, the man felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The past was behind him now, and the road ahead, while uncertain, was something he could face with confidence. The dog, sensing his calm, walked a little closer, his body brushing against the man's leg. It was a gesture of reassurance, of comfort, and the man appreciated it more than he could put into words. They reached the park, a place the man had visited many times before. The dog immediately ran ahead, his energy still boundless despite everything they had been through. The man smiled, watching his loyal companion run freely, the way he always had. For a moment, it felt like everything was right in the world. The dog circled back, sitting at the man's feet, looking up at him with eager eyes. The man bent down, offering a hand to the dog's head, the touch familiar and comforting. "You're my best friend, you know that," he said softly, his voice filled with affection. The dog wagged his tail in response, a simple but powerful answer. Together, they had faced so much, and together, they would continue to face whatever life had in store. It was no longer just about recovery. It was about living, truly living, side by side, with the bond between them stronger than ever. The days continued to pass, and with each one, the bond between the man and his dog grew deeper. The world around them was changing with the seasons, but inside, everything felt grounded and stable. The man's recovery was ongoing, but now it was less about the struggle and more about progress. The dog remained by his side every step of the way, a constant, loyal presence in his life. One afternoon, as the man sat outside on the porch, watching the leaves fall gently from the trees, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led him to this point. His body was no longer the same, but his spirit was stronger than ever. And much of that strength came from the unwavering support of his dog. He reached down to pet the dog, who was lying at his feet, his head resting on the man's leg. "You've been my rock," the man said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. The dog looked up at him, those amber eyes filled with a quiet understanding. There was no need for words. They both knew the depth of their connection. The dog had been with him through the hardest times, and now, as the man began to live again, the dog was still there, steadfast and true. The man took a deep breath, feeling the cool autumn air fill his lungs. He had come so far, and though the road ahead was still long, he was no longer afraid. He knew he had the strength to face whatever came next. The dog stood up and walked over to the man, his tail wagging, as if encouraging him to get up and keep moving forward. The man smiled and stood, feeling a little more steady with each step. The dog immediately fell into place beside him, walking in rhythm, always watching, always protecting. Together, they walked down the path in front of the house, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows on the ground. The world was quiet, peaceful, and the man felt a sense of contentment wash over him. He had been through so much, but now, in this moment, he knew he wasn't alone. He had his dog, his best friend, by his side. The dog, as always, stayed close, his eyes scanning the surroundings, but his body relaxed, knowing that his mission was simple: to be there, to protect, to love. As they continued down the path, the man couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had shared. It wasn't just about recovery anymore. It was about living, truly living, with the dog by his side, every step of the way. The seasons shifted once again, and with the turning of the leaves, the man and his dog found themselves settling into a new rhythm. The days were still filled with progress, though not in the way they had been at the beginning. Now, the challenges were different, but the bond between them had only grown stronger. The man had found his footing once more, and the dog, ever loyal, had been there every step of the way. They had gone from a place of survival to a place of living, truly living. It was a quiet morning when the man found himself sitting on the porch again, his dog lying at his feet, the two of them watching the world wake up. There was a sense of peace in the air, the kind that only comes with time and perseverance. The man looked down at his dog, his companion, the one who had never faltered in his loyalty. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said quietly, his voice filled with a deep sense of gratitude. The dog lifted his head, gazing up at the man with those familiar amber eyes, and the tail gave a soft, contented wag. The man chuckled softly, the sound of it rich with warmth. They had faced the unknown together, and now they were standing on the other side. There was no more fear of the future, no more uncertainty about what lay ahead. They had learned to embrace the present moment, to appreciate the quiet beauty in the simple things. The dog, sensing the change in his owner, moved closer, resting his head on the man's knee, a gesture that spoke volumes. It was the kind of love that didn't need words, the kind that had been built over countless moments shared. The man smiled, running his hand through the dog's fur, and for a moment, he let the weight of everything that had happened settle into his heart. There was no need for grand gestures, no need for loud declarations. They had already said everything they needed to say through their actions, through their shared journey. The world outside was still moving, still changing, but the man and his dog had found their place in it. Together, they had weathered the storm, and together, they had found peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was no longer something to fear. The man knew that as long as they had each other, they would face whatever came next with the same unwavering bond that had carried them this far. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, the man and his dog sat there, side by side, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold.